And recording is in progress.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. So we are here in Leechcraft of Markham, Ontario, in the Greater Toronto bioregion. And we're here with Drawdown Markham and UnityNet International member, Stephanie Schuller. And we are in a park just south of where I am living. And what we are doing is we are having an event here to essentially bring to attention to our programs through Drawdown Markham, where we are trying to move forward on and develop our whole ecosystem of regenerative development education and training hubs. But as we start today, I do acknowledge those who came before us, and I'd like to say a land acknowledgement. So we begin today by acknowledging that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples. We recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. We're grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources. We're committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on here in the Greater Toronto bioregion is the traditional territory of many nations. On this land known as Tikaranto, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe and Anishinaabe peoples, and the Métis peoples, and is now home to many diverse peoples. We'd like to also acknowledge the land we're on here as the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We also acknowledge the Two-Row Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Six Nations of the Tikaranto watershed and the settlers, an agreement that bound them to work together but to develop their societies in parallel on these shared lands. Our role as settlers and displaced people on this land is that we share the responsibility of challenging and disrupting colonial systems that enact violence upon the land and stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. We'd like to thank the Indigenous peoples of these lands, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, for sharing this land with us. We also acknowledge and recognize all of the world's Indigenous peoples as stewards of Mother Earth. Now, I'm not sure, Andrew, if you would like to segment this up into smaller chunks and stop and start the recording, or if we just
no, we're going to roll with it, and we can always edit it later. But if you pause between each segment, that will allow us to do editing much easier. So, okay. Yes, no problem. Just if you would, just as you proceed, if you'll just pause in between each one, that will allow us then to do editing after the production. Thank you.
All right. So thank you. So that was. Did you press a button?
Your video is stopped.
There you go.
All right. Okay, so we are meeting here today, Monday, May 22nd, 2023, which is also World Biodiversity Day, aka the International Day for Biological Diversity. This event is being hosted by UnityNet International in partnership with Drawdown Markham. We're here at the east side of Ada Mackenzie Saddle Creek Park in the Leechcraft area of the city of Markham. At 185 South Park Road in the Greater Toronto bioregion of Ontario, Canada, in the Great Lakes watershed. Please also note that this Drawdown Markham UnityNet GTA Plant Your Youth Peace Garden ceremony is being co-hosted by UnityNet International in partnership with We Energime Global Cooperation Turtle Island, the international civil society organization that's seeking to undertake life value peace education in the context of life learning gardens, with the support of the ad hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill Ambassadors and Activists, AHIABGA, globally. So this hybrid in-person and virtual event is being done in support of the UnityNet Pollinator Ambassador Program and Network. So through the Drawdown Markham and UnityNet events and the programming, we're asking our members to join the UnityNet Honey Project and become a pollinator ambassador, who is someone who will be expected to help protect pollinators by enhancing local and regional habitats for nature in and around the city of Markham, here in the Don River watershed, in the greater Tikaranto bioregion of the Great Lakes area, north of Lake Ontario, Canada, and wherever you might travel or have personal or business connections in all of the cities and communities across Canada and worldwide. First, by planting some youth peace gardens in all of our local communities, so we can learn to become more self-sufficient and resilient and create positive impact, while also helping to create jobs and livelihood in all of our local communities. So please feel free to join our UnityNet Pollinator Ambassador Network at the social media, the Facebook and the LinkedIn sites that were shared on the Eventbrite page where you had registered for this event. This event is also being done in support of the Global Partnership for Regenerative Development and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which takes place starting from 2021 until 2030, along with the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which defines the global biodiversity goals and targets that were established just this last December in Montreal, Quebec, and which we would like to also help to inform the next set of global goals, the post-2030 set of goals following this Sustainable Development Goal period from 2015 to 2030. In addition, we're doing this event today in support of the UnityNet South Markham Community Food Security Network and the establishment of a Markham Interfaith Neighborhood Academic and Business Collaborative, also known as an AHIABGA Collaborative, which will begin to establish formally in multiple communities around the world on all continents, including in Asia and in Africa, starting this year and in 2024, and over the next 6.5 years. So we'll pause there. This will be our second segment of the presentation. So with that, we'll start this third segment. Thank you. So we are here, UnityNet International is our small organization, and you're going to point it properly. We are seeking to create a global network of localized, or glocalized as we call it, AHIABGA collaboratives in all of our local communities who are dedicated to establishing their own local peace and resiliency networks as part of a global effort in all countries around the world to work together in partnership with each other to help to achieve a responsible, localized, productive, compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy that leaves no one behind. And wherever we are in the world, whether it is here in the city of Markham, in this Don River watershed, or otherwise, in your own local communities, in your own local bioregions, the watershed and pollinator ambassadors of the Global Unity Network will be expected to advocate for and help to establish peace poles in all of our schools and youth peace gardens in all of our local communities by working with all of the members of the local AHIABGA Collaborative Empowerment Networks, whose mandate and job is to empower all of our local and localized humanitarian entrepreneurs in each of our own local and regional communities, in our own local bioregions, by working together in collaboration and partnership with the members of the Unity International Network of localized AHIABGA collaboratives, who are each in their own way celebrating our diversity locally at home and in one local community at a time. Because we understand that these are the first steps to establishing a productive peace center project, and perhaps also a UnityNet museum somewhere here in York region, in the Don or Rouge watersheds of the greater Tikaranto bioregion, which means we need to continue to have ongoing discussions with institutions like York University and the University of Toronto and Rotary Ontario and the local Scouts groups and the YMCA leadership and the school boards with their members of the City of Markham's Mayor Youth Task Force and with IBM Canada, which has their headquarters in Markham and hosts one of York University's Markham campus buildings. And in the meantime, we'll continue to have conversations about twinning some peace and regenerative development projects between the INAB collaboratives established here in the Greater Toronto bioregion or in Northern Ontario, or with the Indigenous peoples, including the Markham INAB Collaborative, and any new projects or climate smart community developments, including the beginnings of the UnityNet Eco-Village Centers of Excellence Network in places like Taiwan, or China, or the Philippines, or Nepal, or in India, or in Bangladesh, or Indonesia, and of course, all of those marginalized communities and rural communities in Africa, where we may be able to assist with the development of their own local POC projects in all of the various states and provinces of Turtle Island, in Canada, in Mexico, in the US, in the Caribbean, or whether it is here in Ontario, or all the way out in BC, or possibly also in Alberta and Quebec, or elsewhere on this beautiful land we call home, by helping to establish our own local PodNet enterprise network locally here in Southern Ontario, Canada, in the Great Lakes watershed, and internationally. Remember as well that all of the programs of UnityNet International and Global are going to be done through the INAB collaboratives, whose anchor partnerships are done through the schools in each of our own local communities. So we can take another break here and split the videos when we have time to edit. So we will go on to the next stage of our broadcast. Is your hand okay?
I'm doing good. Yeah.
So, all of our watershed and pollinator ambassadors here in the Greater Toronto bioregion will seek to establish relationships with our local institutions, like the University of Toronto and the local school boards, and Seneca College and York University, which already has 5 locations where we can do POC projects at their climate solution parks, 2 of which are in downtown Toronto, 1 in the Regent Park neighborhood, and another site at Downsview Park, which is a former military base in Toronto, where there are over 570 acres of land to work with, and which is already home to one of Canada's largest urban farms. The York University Markham campus researchers have also at least 3 other sites, including at a First Nations community in Northern Ontario, where it is our hope that we may be able to create some twinned Indigenous community projects by working with the various INAB collaboratives, these empowerment networks in places like Kenya and Uganda, and in South Africa with the Zulu, or in Mexico with the Maya, or in Asia, where I'm going in a few days. And if we can partner with York University and the University of Toronto and various other universities and colleges and high schools, we can also twin our projects with others through the UnityNet CTP program in places like Hawaii and California and Sri Lanka and Nepal and Indonesia and Vietnam, and of course in Africa, and perhaps also in Latin America and the Caribbean and Oceania too. All of this can be done through our UnityNet Global Sister Schools program and the learning exchange programs between the schools. So we can help to get those students learning quickly. We can empower them to learn how to design and deploy the solutions we need, along with the related learning programs for others in all of our local communities globally, so that young people can get some hands-on experience with all of the various open source, regenerative, climate smart adaptation and resilience solutions that will allow local communities to begin adapting to climate change, to help them put them on a path to restoring nature through local habitat restoration projects that are done in their own local watersheds and bioregions. Because our main goal of Drawdown Markham, by working with UnityNet GTA and UnityNet International and the 5 Points Youth Foundation and AHIABGA, through the We Energize Global Cooperation Turtle Island International Civil Society Organization globally, is to showcase SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals, for the primary purpose of teaching young people and all of their family members and their friends and all of the members of their own local communities about the solutions that will allow us collectively to adapt and potentially even to thrive in a warming climate and to achieve a localized, responsible, productive, compassionate, collaborative, and regenerative economy, and one that truly leaves no one behind. So we go on, we'll take another quick break here as we think about editing this broadcast and the recording. And I will have the last page of our formal broadcast here. I just want to remind everybody.
Lloyd, you
Yes.
actually have to pause, literally pause for like 10 seconds and then proceed. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so please also remember our next big events that we are doing this year. Our Abraham Project tree planting event is on Monday, June 5th, 2023. And this is on World Environment Day. This is our globally coordinated Tree of Peace and Reconciliation Showcase Project for global cooperation on World Environment Day, Monday, June 5th, where the Global Unity Network and our UnityNet events are intended to facilitate regenerative localization by creating empowerment networks for the local regenerative development solutions providers, our female and feminist humanitarian entrepreneurs in our local communities worldwide, for the goal of assisting in the global transition to a localized, productive CCRE, that LNOB, with the CCRE meaning the compassionate, collaborative, regenerative economy, and LNOB meaning we are leaving no one behind, as we approach the end of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030. So following our Abraham Project tree planting event will be our International Youth Day event on Saturday, August 12th, where we plan to participate in the globally coordinated Bubble Fun festivals during the UnityNet Community Unity Weeks, where we are hoping to work with teams here in Canada and also globally, including our allies in places like Taiwan and in Asia and in Africa as well. And at the end of the year, in October, are the Youth Peace Weeks, which start on Global Cooperation Day, which is Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. This is the date of our Ubuntu Summit, the online virtual event, which also launches not just Youth Peace Weeks, but also the Global Climate Smart Youth Forum, which is our primary hybrid learning week program that takes place until Monday, October 16th, World Food Day. So we will take the final 10 seconds of a break. Do we actually need silence? So what I'd like to do is to also discuss the global biodiversity goals that have been passed recently in Montreal. So the new biodiversity framework for the period 2022 to 2030 sets out an ambitious plan to implement broad-based action to bring about a transformation in our society's relationship with biodiversity by 2030, in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals, and ensure that by 2030, or by 2050, sorry, the shared vision of living in harmony with nature is fulfilled. So the framework sets out 4 long-term goals to realize the 2050 vision for biodiversity and 23 global biodiversity targets to be achieved by the year 2030. It calls for, among other things, a near zero loss of bio-rich areas and critical ecosystems by 2030, the conservation of at least 30% of all terrestrial and inland waters, as well as coastal and marine areas by 2030, the restoration of 30% of degraded ecosystems, and a 50% reduction in the threats posed by invasive species. It also calls for respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities, protecting environmental human rights defenders, being gender responsive, and following a participatory and inclusive process in decision-making. To transit to a climate-resilient and biodiversity-friendly planet, it calls for a 50% reduction in the use of pesticides and hazardous chemicals through integrated pest management and efficient nutrient cycling, promoting sustainable consumption practices, and halving global food waste and waste generation. It recommends the use of an ecosystem-based approach, including nature-based solutions to address the biodiversity and climate crises. The framework calls for reducing subsidies by around $500 billion per year by 2030, and scaling up the incentives for conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. It also calls for mobilizing at least $200 billion per year from all sources by 2030 to enable the implementation of national biodiversity targets. So this is our event today on World Biodiversity Day. It is again May 22nd, 2023. We are here in the Greater Takaranto bioregion, here in this beautiful park, in this beautiful land called Canada, in the Greater Toronto area. So I am Lloyd Halferty, and I am with UnityNet International, together with my colleague Stephanie Schuller, who's also with the Maui Aloha Project, where an eco-village center of excellence is intended to be established eventually in Maui, Hawaii, along with one here in Ontario.
And around the world.
And of course, a network around the world. So thank you very much. And we will actually be taking a walk. We can either continue our broadcast as we take our walk around the park and discuss different things.
Yes,
or we
please.
Can,
Stephanie, as long as you're able, Stephanie, it's
Yes.
lovely to share what you have there. So we're
Yes,
at your
well,
convenience.
we're really grateful here. We're in a suburban area of the Greater Toronto area right now. Lloyd Halferty and myself, Stephanie Schuller, in Ontario, Canada. And there's an area with possibility here and what we are doing at UnityNet International is trying to envision how we can go forward, and we've got available space here to create these centers, you know, these garden centers, these farming centers in the suburban area, and really en masse bring about learning for all of the kids so that they can be kids, the children in schools, but also intergenerational communities. You can see here that there's a park, you know, there's a water pad, there's
So I wanted to point this out because this, we think, is a perfect location to do a Bubble Fun Festival. I'm actually was thinking, and I was talking to Stephanie earlier about the fact that we could probably set this up as a with a couple of nets at either end, and maybe put the kids on rollerblades, and we could have a Bubble Fun sports tournament, maybe some bubble roller hockey with ball hockey.
we can
Do a number of events. We could have a bubble fun basketball game over at the basketball court over there.
we see that in so many of these spaces, urban, suburban, and of course rural. There's spaces where we can build these centers of learning so that the children and of the next generations, and also all intergenerational community members, can participate in spaces here where they really learn regenerative procedures, especially regarding food systems, that children should know. Of course, we know how to grow our own food, that the families of tomorrow will grow their own food, and that we'll be able to have enough, and so nobody is left behind. And here we want to utilize some of this space and other spaces, you know, locally in the GTA, in Ontario, and throughout Canada and around the world. We want to be able to utilize green spaces like this, where we have an opportunity to create these peace gardens, to create these hubs of interaction where all kinds of learning can happen experientially, outdoors in the fresh air, standing on the ground, you know, on the grass and on the earth, and putting our hands in the earth and really seeing the fruits of our labor, and to be able to connect with all of the higher learning institutions in the Greater Toronto area and throughout the world. I'm doing finishing my doctorate right now at OISE at the University of Toronto, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. This is crucial that we bring about this kind of learning into the regular atmosphere of children and of the community members. And it's crucial that we engage the large institutions like the universities that get so much grant opportunities and also so much land, where we can really en masse bring out the children and the community members. And this should be a regular kind of interaction in these beautiful green spaces that not only are already beautiful and plentiful with trees.
Remember when they used to put pesticides and herbicides on our grasses so they would kill these beautiful flowers
Right.
that bloom? And I remember when my wife first came to Canada and she saw these flowers blooming, and it would be a carpet of yellow on the ground. And she said, that is incredibly beautiful.
Yes.
And I told her, well, that's actually a recent thing. We never had that before because we used to use pesticides to kill these flowers, and she couldn't understand it. And then suddenly they turned white like they are today. And she goes, wow, that's another transformation.
Another
That goes
transformation.
from yellow to white, and now you have a new palette of color on your grasses. You've
And-
got the green
And what
and
we've
the yellow and the white all together.
and what we've lost in the learning systems, and it's so crucial that we savor the wisdoms of all of our cultures and all of the indigenous wisdoms, all of our identities, because actually these dandelions, these dandelions, not only is the flower, as you can see here, not only is the flower medicine if you boil it, but also the stem is medicine if you boil it, and the leaves
are
at
great
the
for salad.
bottom. And some of these natural remedies that happen everywhere in any green space, if we don't use the pesticides, if we are responsible, there's medicine here for major human illnesses. Never mind here, we look at the trees and we see that there are pine trees and spruce trees. We see that there are maple trees. There's medicine and there's food. And we're not learning that en masse. And we need to savor the elder wisdom and the wisdoms of all of our groups. And we have an advantage in the Greater Toronto area where it's one of the most multicultural cities in the world. And we're grateful that the Unity Net team is based in the Greater Toronto area. And we believe that
Well,
was
it's global, though. The
right.
network is
The
global.
network is global, but Lloyd and myself and Mark, from an energetic and transformative opportunity, we are brought together so we could really amplify these kind of learning centers en masse, so that we are truly an educated society and also responsible to create regenerative processes for the planet and its inhabitants, for all of our thriving and well-being. So
So
thank
what
you.
I'd like to do, I actually brought more papers with me, and there's a reason I brought these papers. So I brought this one in particular. This is an event that I attended earlier this year. This was with my colleague, Maria. Maria became an ambassador for peace herself as well. So this is the organization, this was the event we attended on October 23rd, 2022. This was last year. She's listed here on the back page with her name. On this page, Maria Sherry Laxontan. So she is a peace ambassador as well. So she's also doing projects in the Philippines. I will reconnect with her as well because I am one of her ambassadors actually. And what we would like to do when I am in Taiwan, because I will be leaving tomorrow evening, arriving on Thursday, is we will start to talk about establishing a global network of UnityNet Spark for Humanity hubs around the world. Of course, in Hawaii, of course, in Bermuda, where that conversation began. But what I would like to do is also discuss with the Century Initiative, and this is another piece of paper I brought with me here, is we just attended an event in Toronto by the Century Initiative. This is their report. the Century Initiative would like to have 100 million people in Canada by the year 2100. So this is their goal. So we would like to help them achieve this goal. This is the agenda for the event that I just attended on Monday. So we would like to approach this organization and talk about the potential to do a large event here in Toronto after I return, where we would like, and I didn't bring that particular piece of paper, but we would like to have a conversation with them, a public discussion, where we can talk with all of the people in the Greater Toronto area, identify all of the different places where people are coming from around the world, and establish in all of their own local countries a peace center connected to the peace centers here on Turtle Island. And so we can begin the conversation about developing training centers, education and training centers and learning centers around the world, where we can engage with, especially with all the young people, especially on the youngest continent, which is Africa, in terms of helping to ensure that they can adapt to the new climate, and ensuring that they are thriving on their own lands, but also providing them with opportunities for not a forced migration, but opportunities where they can choose to live in other places and be global citizens that can travel the world, that can do good for the world and do better for all people. And so these are the types of conversations we'd like to have with these organizations like the Century Initiative, and of course, all of the members of our INAB collaboratives as we build each local multi-stakeholder partnership in each of our own local watersheds. So this is why I was bringing some of these other documents with me. We will want to have a conversation as we move forward, as I move to Taiwan for the next 7 months until the end of the year. I will be engaging with a number of different organizations and people in those parts of East Asia and Southeast Asia. We will hopefully be able to have meetings with different communities, whether it's in Nepal or India or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or in the Philippines or in Vietnam, where we have some of our associates through Energym University, where we'd like to deploy and demonstrate through these what we call POC projects, the proof of concept projects, in particular, the Wheel of Life Farm. We are very much focused on, again, as well, the climate smart kitchens, which we'd like to establish with every other type of UnityNet Unity Garden development project.
I think it's also really important to note here, we're in a park and you can see all kinds of different children and family members and people doing all kinds of different activities, dancing, music, playing in the water. And that's a really important part of UnityNet International, a really important part of what I do regarding my doctor. When we're talking about planetary well-being, we're also talking about the people. We have a global youth mental health crisis right now. And as founder and director also of MAP, the Maui Aloha Project Eco Village Initiative, it's crucial that we have communities that prioritize play, not just the learning systems we're talking about, but we need to be balanced in the way of our holistic development, our holistic well-being, especially of the children, because we have a youth mental health crisis. And Canada, unfortunately, has one of the top countries with the highest youth suicide rates in the world. So we've got Lloyd talked about transformation. This is an opportunity. These parks should be filled with community members, with children playing. These communities, whether they're in suburban, urban, or in rural areas, should be focused on our social and emotional well-being. This is crucial to everything. We are what we eat. We mirror that. And to see these kind of spaces where every city in the world, where so many cities in the world and countries in the world put so much money into their beautiful parks and the planting of trees and the various spaces that they have covered and for play and whatnot, open spaces. This is crucial. We live in a time which is too heavily focused on intellectual and academic development only. And we've got to play more, we've got to socialize more, and we've got to reprogram, especially after COVID, which hit the world. We've got a loneliness issue for the young children, for the young adults, and for the elders. There's a loneliness issue, which definitely feeds in to the well-being of our communities and the well-being of our children. And we've got to be out here playing just for the sake of savoring our lives, just for the sake. And, you know, we know that Lloyd and I know, and we believe in UnityNet International and the various projects that we're involved in, because we know that this can be heaven on earth. We live in a time of utmost possibility, and we're trying to develop that network.
So we'll take another maybe 10-second pause here, and I'd like to continue walking this way for a reason. Because for two reasons. So we can hold a pause here. We'll continue walking this way. I'll walk backwards. And so what we'd like to do, or what my vision has been for this particular piece of land, and actually you can see, if you turn the camera over this way, there are two brand new buildings that are still under construction here. They're high rises. They're two of the first. There's probably going to be a dozen more at least here that are going to be, this is going to be a new downtown area of our city. And so the developer here, Times Group, has owned originally all of this land, a large chunk of land that was originally a mink farm way back in the day. And so this is actually the original Leechcroft farm, which is why it's called the Leechcroft area of Markham. So everything until you see those hydro towers over there as well is actually undevelopable because of those hydro towers. So there's another opportunity for us to potentially do something really unique, where we would like to potentially connect a new subway station that is going to be built probably about 4 kilometers this way at Yonge Street. And that connection could be with along this hydro corridor where all these towers are, with the new Rouge National Park, which is about 6 kilometers this way. So we have an opportunity to create what I have been thinking about as a bubble fun corridor for nature, connecting the new subway with the Rouge National Park along this hydro corridor, which is, again, it cannot be developed because of the hydro corridor
And the bioregion enhancing.
So we can now have an opportunity to use this corridor to teach people, to bring young people, to bring families out, to learn how to grow food, how to construct all of the regenerative climate smart solutions. Another reason I like this area as well, and I'd like to continue walking this way. So it is a park that is 8 acres large. So we have here a ball field, again, another opportunities to do bubble fun at scale. Maybe a bubble fun soccer match. I would think and hope would resonate with many of the communities in Africa, especially in places like Malawi, where soccer or football is a passion among many.
Well, and so, you know, so much of our efforts and Andrew Network, so much of our efforts is about peace and coming together. And we've been living in such competition rather than cooperation. We've been living in such silos, and we live in a time now where we can really bring the communities together and the processes together, and really be able to share the knowledge and share the experiences, and through play, through sport, through dance, through music, through the arts. These are the ways that the children are going to connect. These are the ways that the communities are going to connect in play and involved in our passions.
So I'm walking over here. We're next to a playground. We're now at the edge of the park, or approaching the edge of the park now. And so there's a reason, again, I'm coming over here. What we can see is undeveloped land, a fairly large chunk of undeveloped land. This is actually just a very small portion of it, and it's much larger if we go past those high-rise buildings that are just to our north. But all of this land out here, and much of it, is actually slated to become a school and community center for the community. As they build these towers of residents along with the townhouses, there's opportunity here to establish a peace and regenerative development center. A peace center that would include hopefully all 5 of the open source regenerative climate smart infrastructure solutions. If we can partner and create an INAB collaborative for the city of Markham, we have land that is not developed, that's available here. You can see where the trees are in the distance is actually a branch of the Don River that's flowing south underneath the highway. But all of this land is set aside by the town or by the city of Markham to become a school and community center. So we now have this opportunity to have the discussions with the city, with the developer. We know there's only one developer. He's developed all of these buildings. He owns all of this land. Times Group, we can talk with them. They are an Iranian immigrant company from Iran, and have these discussions with them about how we can create a dynamic learning center to educate and train all the young people in our local communities, especially those who are most marginalized in our communities, I'm sure they are homeless. They are invisible to us here in Markham because the housing prices are incredibly high. I am sure that there are many people who would be considered homeless, even if they're living in their cars in the parking lots of some of our communities, and we just don't see them. It's not like downtown Toronto where you find people that are homeless on the streets and it's quite visible. But as I had learned when I started on this journey many years ago, pre-COVID, there are homeless people even in rural communities. And so that was the original concept, was we would create a peace and regenerative development center that would educate and train those homeless people along with those who are marginalized in our communities. And there are people who are not getting by in this economy. I mean, it is, you hear the headlines all the time, you may not see them, but the usage of, for instance, food banks has skyrocketed over the last couple of years. And so we would like to not just feed the poor, but teach the poor how to feed themselves. So this idea, of course, of teach a man to fish rather than to just give a man to fish. So this is part of the concept. We're using the lens of what we call humanitarian entrepreneurship. Humanitarian entrepreneurship means we are teaching entrepreneurship, but through the lens of achieving those global goals, those right now sustainable development goals, and what we predict in the future to be post-2030 regenerative development goals. So creating businesses that are humanitarian in nature, They're there to solve problems just like any other business, but the problems they're solving are intended to be measurable actions toward achieving those global goals that we are wanting to achieve for all people on this planet, leaving no one behind. So I think with that, we can probably end today with our quick talk about all the various things that we are going to be moving forward with.
And we can end on, there's a little bumblebee right there. And unfortunately, it's very rare to see bumblebees.
We have a little tiny wetland here. Too.
And a little wetland right here, people probably overlook.
Well, but before you leave, Andrew Williams Jr., I do want to thank you. I'm here from Andrew Networks. I'm fully supporting this project. As you might know, we began this in 2021. We'll be going through 2023 and throughout the rest of the decade. So thank you so much, Lloyd Helferty. You can find more information at andrewnetworks.com because Andrew Networks.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. And thank you from Stephanie Schuler and Lloyd Helferty and UnityNet International.
Bye-bye.
Everyone be well.
Signing out. Bye-bye.